Hey guys, tonight we're going back in time. Not to some glamorous royal court or mysterious battlefield, but to something far grittier and far more impressive. You're standing on a patch of churned up mud, boots half sinking, shoulder already aching from the yoke strapped across it. There's no fanfare, no banners, just the endless clatter of chisels, the slap of wet mortar, and the distant barked orders of someone with a fancier cloak than you. You're a worker, a lowly, sunburnt, underfed castle builder. And right now, you've got a block of stone to move before the sun climbs too high and starts baking the mortar into chalk. You won't believe this, but it'll take decades to build just one of these beasts, and you're part of the reason it even gets off the ground. Alright, before you get too cozy, go ahead and smash that like button and subscribe, but only if your heart says yes. And hey, drop your local time and where you're tuning in from. I'm curious how many future castle masons we've got out there. Dim the lights, get that fan going for some background vibes, and let's chill into tonight's little adventure. You squint up at a hulking half wall of stone, 3 times your height already, with rough wooden scaffolding climbing its flanks like skeletal ribs. The wind howls louder up there. You'll be hauling buckets up later, but first, it's your job to unload the next batch of stone. You reach the edge of the muddy track just in time to see a lumbering ox cart trundle toward the yard. Its wheels sink deep, groaning under the weight of limestone freshly quarried from 10 miles off. The oxen snort, their ribs visible beneath rough hides, dragging the load with that stubborn, exhausted rhythm you now know too well. You and 2 others brace shoulder to wheel as the cart tilts toward a rut, and somehow, with a mix of curses and mud flying into your mouth, it rights itself. Every block matters. These aren't bricks like you'd stack in a fireplace. Each stone is hand-cut by the masons into roughly rectangular forms, and though they look interchangeable, they're not. They've been numbered, scratched with charcoal or notched like tally marks, so the walls rise according to a plan only the master mason understands. You, though, you just haul. You wedge a wooden sled beneath the first block, smear it with sheep fat for a little slip and start dragging. 2 others hoist the back, groaning in time. The block shudders forward, inch by inch. There are no wheels here. It's too uneven for that. You lay down rollers as you go, picking them up again behind you like some ancient board game. All around, the site thrums with labour. Teams are digging a trench for the outer wall. Others are smoothing the earth inside the courtyard, shaping it with picks and bare feet. Some lug timber from the carpentry shed, split logs to be hewn into scaffolds or roofing beams. Everywhere there's movement, sweat, barked orders, and the occasional clang of a dropped hammer. You pause, panting. Your tunic is soaked through at the chest and underarms. The smell, yourself, the oxen, the wet mud, the tang of crushed stone is overwhelming. But the wall above? It's growing. That was just bare sky 2 weeks ago. Now it casts shade. Someone swears up on the scaffold. A bucket of wet mortar slips and crashes below. A moment later, a voice calls out. It missed. Barely. You've seen worse. Just last week, a new boy lost 2 fingers when he tried to catch a block tipping off a pulley. No one told him stone doesn't care. You did your best with a strip of linen and a mug of strong ale, but he hasn't come back. Not everyone lasts. The foreman walks past, muttering about the East Bastion. You don't know what that means, not exactly, but you nod as if you do. You've started to learn that pretending to understand is often safer than asking. Still, you catch glimpses of sketches nailed to wooden boards, charcoal outlines of battlements and parapets with tiny letters only the learned can read. You turn back to your block. The rollers are soaked now, sticking to the ground. You need dry ones. You grab the bundle of spares, teeth clenched, and swap them one by one. Above, another group calls for more mortar. Another block clicks into place. And just like that, the wall grows again. The sun climbs higher, and so does the wall. By midday, the line of workers shifts to the shade, clutching hunks of bread and salted fish in their hands. No one speaks much. There's no breath for it. Just the sound of chewing, coughing, and the occasional muttered curse when someone bites into gravel that somehow made it into the flour again. This same mill that grinds grain also sharpens chisels on the side. That's what the baker says anyway. You take a seat near the base of the new wall and lean back against a mound of earth that wasn't there yesterday. Your fingertips are raw. You pick at a splinter. Someone nearby dozes off with his cap over his eyes, mouth wide open. Another is sharpening a chisel with a rock and a rhythm that matches your heartbeat. Scrape, scrape, pause. The castle isn't just walls and towers. You've come to realise it's a beast that eats time. Every trench, every hoist, every pit filled with gravel to hold weight. All of it takes days, weeks, sometimes longer if the weather turns, and it does, often. Last month, a freak frost snapped the wooden scaffolds like twigs and sent half the southern tower crumbling. They started again. They always do. Back to work. This time, you're handed a wooden bucket sloshing with grey slurry. Mortar. It stinks today. Too much lime. Or maybe someone dropped something in it they shouldn't have. One of the lads swears he saw the almoner spit wine into the vat for luck. You climb the ladder slowly, one hand gripping the rung, the other balancing the bucket. Every rung creaks, the scaffold sways, but you're getting used to that part. Except when someone sings. A tune can make the boards vibrate just enough to make you drop your lunch. Or worse. At the top, the wall edge is jagged but rising. Masons work here. Grey robes covered in dust. Eyes squinting behind chisel strokes so precise you'd think they were carving scripture, not just stone. You hand over the mortar. A grunt, a nod. That's as close to thanks as you'll get. But you see it, the moment the mason lays the wet mix, levels the stone and gives it a final tap. The block settles, locking in like a tooth in a jaw. That one's yours. You climb down again, muscles burning. The whole site is in rhythm now. Stone lifted, mortar laid, timber shifted, hoists turning. There's a song in the noise if you listen close. One you can't sing but somehow still recognise. Even the cart drivers shouting at oxen are part of it. There's a kind of pride here, hidden behind the grime. You're building something that'll outlast every single name being shouted today. Still, there's a darker hum too. The superstition. You've heard whispers. Some men believe the first stone must be fed, blood mixed into the mortar, or a tiny animal placed beneath the foundation. One night, you saw someone bury a bird in the trench where the gate will be. No one talked about it the next morning. No one dared. By late afternoon, a storm's rolling in from the east. The wind shifts. You can taste iron in the air, and not just from your own cracked lip. The foreman shouts to cover the lime pit before rain turns it explosive. You rush to help, dragging a stained canvas over the cauldron-sized basin. Just as the first fat drops slap the dust, everyone scrambles to shelter. You duck beneath the supply awning, heart thumping from the sprint. The wall steams, kissed by rain. The mortar hisses like it's alive. In a way it is. Every stone laid today will fuse tighter by morning. Rain helps, unless it floods. Then it all comes down. You stare at the rising wall through the veil of rain. It's jagged, uneven, braced by wood that looks too thin for its job. But it's real, and it's growing. You built that, and tomorrow you'll build more. The next morning begins with frost biting your fingers and breath curling like smoke. The mud has hardened overnight, stiff underfoot. Somewhere off in the pre-dawn gloom, the oxen are already groaning. But today is different. Today, he arrives. The master mason. You've never spoken to him. Most haven't. He doesn't shout like the foreman or grunt like the labourers. He moves slowly, robes trimmed with dark wool, a carved staff in one hand, not for walking, but for pointing. His eyes miss nothing. Where the rest of you see stone and mud, he sees a future wall walk, a spiral stair, a window that will someday hold coloured glass. No one dares joke while he's on site, not even the foreman. He walks through the scaffolding like it was built for him alone. A boy from the carpenter's shed hurries behind him with a bundle of rolled parchment tied in leather cord. Plans, sketches. You catch a glimpse as the mason unrolls one on a board. Black lines drawn so clean and sharp they look burned into the surface. Angles, towers, symbols you can't read, but he can. He gestures to the northwest corner and frowns. The wall curves too early. A mistake. Not yours, but you can feel the tension ripple down the line. He doesn't shout. He simply draws a small X on the stone with a piece of chalk and says nothing. That mark is worse than a curse. It means the crew will be dismantling that section after lunch. No one complains aloud, but tools slam a little harder that morning. He consults with the lead carpenter next, a broad-shouldered man with fingers like knots of rope. They speak in low voices about the hoist being built to lift heavier keystones. The design's his, but it won't work if the counterweights aren't precise. You hear mention of something called a shear leg and a double pulley housing. You don't understand it. You're not meant to. But you do know this. The last time the hoist failed, a block shattered and sent a mason tumbling. The hoist matters. The master mason turns to a pile of rejected stone, those with cracks too fine for the quarrymen to catch. He selects one and, to your shock, lifts his hammer. One sharp blow splits it clean down the centre. He nods and walks on, leaving behind a perfect half-dome piece. You'll see it again in a window arch, weeks from now. He stops near where you're working, and for a moment, just a breath, you meet his eyes. They're grey, unreadable. Then he looks past you, gestures to the block you just unloaded, and murmurs something about grain angle and sheer risk. You have no idea what it means, but someone marks your stone with a red smear. Not good. By midday, his path takes him to the tower base, where men are chiselling foundation outlines into packed clay. You watch as he kneels, scoops a handful of soil and crumbles it in his fist. He smells it, tastes it. You don't know what he's testing for, but the foreman seems relieved when the mason says, "Good, it'll hold." He returns to the masterboard and sketches something. Quick, practiced, but beautiful. A simple corner buttress, drawn in strokes like water. Then, just like that, he rolls his parchment, taps his staff twice on the stone floor, and walks off without a word. The boy scrambles after him, nearly tripping. He'll be back in a week, maybe less. You look again at the stone marked with the red smear. You'll have to move it. But for now, all you can do is stare after the man who sees castles inside sketches and knows exactly how to bring them out. After the master mason's departure, the sight feels different, charged, but tense. It's as if his gaze lingers in the air like smoke, tracing over every stone you touch. No one slacks off this afternoon, not even Joss the basket carrier, who usually manages to disappear for firewood just before hauling duty. Today he's sweating like the rest of you, hauling mortar buckets without a murmur. You drag the marked stone to the edge of the scrap pile. It's not wasted, not entirely. Cracked stones get chipped down into filler blocks or ground into aggregate for future mortar mixes. Nothing's truly discarded. Everything has a place, even in ruin. That's something the master mason says often, also the foreman claims. You've begun to realise something about the man. He doesn't build with stone alone. He builds with time, vision, and math, and not the kind you learned counting sheep bones as a child. No, This is sacred geometry. Angles that draw heaven downward, curves that hold weight like a cradle. Towers balanced on spiral symmetry so perfect that even a mistake you can't see could doom it all. The masons talk about it sometimes over supper, how the master once delayed a build by a month because the south-facing tower didn't align with sunrise on Michaelmas. You thought it was superstition at first. Now you wonder. He sees meaning in things the rest of you miss. Your section of wall is nearing waist height. It looks straight enough to your eyes, but when the master's apprentice returns late in the afternoon, he brings something peculiar, a wooden triangle with a hanging plumb line. He checks the verticality of your work, muttering measurements. Even a slight lean could mean disaster by the third story. You suddenly notice how much the wall wobbles when the wind hits just right. Not enough to fall, but enough to whisper back at you. Later, you catch a rare conversation between the master mason and the lord of the estate. The nobleman arrives on horseback, robes clean, beard oiled, completely impractical for a construction site. He steps delicately around the mud as if it might bite. His questions are simple. When will the gatehouse be finished? Will there be enough room for 5 horses abreast? Can we add another window here? The master mason answers carefully, never rudely but always with control. Yes, my lord, but another window will weaken the parapet. With 5 horses, the bridge will need new bracing. The gatehouse depends on the delivery of timber from the coast. You admire it, the lord asks. The master decides. And yet the lord still thinks it was his idea. That, you think, is real power. That evening, the foreman gathers everyone and shares the next phase of the plan. The southeast tower begins next week. Foundations must be cleared, rock broken, soil tested. It's the master's design. There's a hush around the fire pit when his name comes up. Not out of fear, but reverence. The kind people reserve for those who know more than the rest, who see the whole tapestry while others clutch only thread. You lie down in your hut that night, back pressed against straw, the scent of lime and timber still clinging to your skin. As you drift into sleep, you try to picture what the master mason sees when he looks at the half-built keep. You see gaps, chaos, 1,000 mismatched blocks, but he sees a fortress, a symbol, a future echo of power that hasn't yet been sung. The sun rises slow behind the hills as your breath ghosts in the morning chill. Today you're not headed to the wall or the scaffold. You're joining the quarry team. It's a long walk, almost 2 hours east through forest and over hill. You go in a line with 8 others, boots thudding in rhythm, each carrying tools. Iron picks, wedges, mallets, and 2 wheelbarrows tied with rope. The path bends through rocky scrub, where mist clings low, and someone jokes that even the birds won't follow you here. You laugh, but quietly. The quarry is cursed, or so they say. You reach it just as the first light spills over the ridgeline. It's a wound in the earth, shallow, wide, littered with half-cut blocks and chips of white-grey stone. The air smells dry and bitter, like dust and broken bone. The master mason isn't here, but his instructions are carved into a timber post. Chalk markings, lines indicating how wide, how deep, which direction to cut the grain. You pick your place along the ledge. A foreman hands you a long iron wedge and a wooden mallet. You knock it into a fault line scored in the rock days earlier, where the masons identified a vein of limestone that'll split clean. There's a rhythm to this too. Tap, turn, tap, shift. If you strike wrong, the stone won't split. It'll shear off unevenly, wasted. One tap too hard and the fracture will run wild. And then it happens. A low, groaning crack echoes underfoot. The block gives, clean, smooth, perfect. You step back as others lever it free with iron bars, tilting it into the makeshift sledge of greased logs. It's heavy, nearly 400 pounds. but with enough hands and rolling timber it starts to move. Someone whispers thanks to the stone. Not joking. You've heard stories. One quarryman refused to kneel after a perfect cut and broke his leg the next day. You don't take chances like that out here. But not every block comes so cleanly. One crew farther along breaks a stone unevenly. Vein running deep and wrong. Useless. Another strike crumbles a whole chunk into gravel. The foreman curses. That piece had been marked for a cornerstone. It takes hours to find another of matching grain and colour. You stop for a meal of cold beans and stale bread. The wind kicks up fine white powder that clings to your arms, your eyebrows, your tongue. You chew grit with every bite. No one speaks. The quarry drains you in a different way than the castle yard. It's quieter, lonelier, and every mistake feels carved into the ground itself. By early afternoon, the cart arrives. Just one, pulled by 2 oxen who look like they regret their entire existence. The wagon has space for 6 stones. That's it. Any more and the axle might snap on the return trip. Each block must be loaded with care, wedged tight with hay and rope. The weight shifts easily, and the road home is long and uneven. As you lift one block with 4 others, your knees nearly buckle. The foreman counts. 3, 2, lift, and you heave it onto the cart. Your spine screams, your palms blister, you spit blood. You're not sure if it's from your teeth or your lungs. 1 stone down, 5 to go. By the time the last stone is loaded, the oxen are stamping their hooves, snorting plumes into the cooling air. The cart creaks under the weight, its wheels already bowed slightly from the load. The foreman checks the ropes 3 times, muttering about the last cart that toppled on a bend and shattered every block inside. That was 2 weeks of quarrying gone in one sickening crunch. You and 2 others are assigned to escort the wagon back. It's not a glamorous task. You don't ride. You walk, one hand always on the side rail, ready to shove a block back into place or throw your weight against the cart if it starts to slide. The path is narrow and rutted, with roots like fingers clawing out of the dirt, and the weight groans with every turn. Half an hour in, you come to a slope, the worst part. The cart must be braced with stones to keep it from picking up speed. One man climbs ahead, planting wedges beneath the wheels at every few steps. The oxen struggle. You swear you can hear the wood in the axle beginning to whine like a dying tree. At the steepest curve, your foot slips. Just mud, nothing serious. But your heart punches your ribs because one slip at the wrong time would send half a ton of stone straight down the hill, and you with it. You grip tighter, adjust your stance and keep walking. The fringe stories whisper of cursed stones, blocks that fall off carts 3 times before they're ever laid, or ones that bring down scaffolds days after placement. No one says it aloud, but you glance at the second block on the cart. It has a long streak down one side, like a lightning scar. You'll be watching that one. Eventually the castle comes into view. Not the whole thing, just a tower crest and a flutter of fabric at the top. A standard bearing the Lord's colours. The rest of it hides behind trees and slope, but your heart lifts anyway. It means food, shelter, and the relief of handing off your load. At the yard, carpenters wave you toward the unloading pit. The oxen stop with a final grunt. The cart rocks once. You brace. It settles. You're safe. For now. The unloading is just as dangerous as the climb. The blocks are slid one by one onto straw-covered planks, then dragged into the staging area where masons will inspect them. If the grain's wrong or the shape uneven, back it goes. Sometimes you wonder if they reject blocks just to flex their authority. One of the blocks is indeed rejected. Not the lightning-scarred one, oddly, but a pale, smooth slab with a hidden crack visible only under wet brush. A boy paints it with a vinegar-soaked rag to check. The faint line appears like a vein in flesh. The masons shake their heads. Too risky. That night, your legs tremble from the walk, and your shoulders burn in a way that no salve truly fixes. But you lie down knowing that one of those blocks, maybe the one with the scar, is going into the western tower tomorrow. People will walk over it, stand beneath it, trust their lives to it. And only you will remember the sound it made when it split from the quarry wall. The clang of hammers fades today, replaced by the deep woody thunks of axes. You're assigned to the timber team, and your boots now rest on pine needles instead of stone chips. The forest feels almost sacred compared to the chaos of the castle yard. But make no mistake, this place is just as vital to the fortress as any tower or battlement. You're standing in the heart of what will become the skeleton of the castle, not just in the scaffolding that wraps around rising walls like ribs, but in the hoists, the braces, the floors, and every frame that guides the stone into place. And today, your job is to help bring down giants. The sawyers are already hard at work, their shirts off despite the cold, arms glistening as they work a two-man crosscut saw in slow rhythmic strokes. The tree they're felling is a great one. Tall, straight, a dozen paces around. Its bark is scored with red chalk, a mark made by the master carpenter weeks ago. Every marked tree has been measured, judged for grain, knotting, and even the direction it grew. Leaning trees are no good for hoists. They'll warp under tension. You help dig around the roots while the saw blades bite deep. The forest is silent except for the rasp of metal on wood and the distant caw of rooks. Then, finally, the groan. It begins low in the trunk like a growl and then swells into a long wail as the fibres tear. You back away just in time as the tree falls, crashing through smaller branches, thudding into the earth with enough force to shake your chest. You smell it before you touch it. Sap, sharp and sweet. You place a hand on the fallen trunk. It's warm, almost unnervingly so. Still alive in a way, but not for long. Two men begin stripping the bark with adzes, sending long curls of wood flying. A third scores the trunk at even intervals, measuring for scaffold poles. Nothing will be wasted. Even the offcuts will become pegs, braces, or kindling for the lime burners. The master carpenter walks past, short and broad, with a braided beard and a habit of chewing fennel seeds. He's gruff, but kind, and knows the weight of every plank just by thumping it with a knuckle. He shows you a frame drawing, done in charcoal on tanned hide, of a timber truss for the new roof. Triangles within triangles. It looks like some kind of puzzle, but he explains it simply. Stone holds weight by pressure, wood holds it by balance. You nod, not fully grasping it, but impressed nonetheless. You help lift the logs onto a sledge made from thick branches lashed with hide. No wheels here, the forest floor is too rough. The sled will be dragged back by mule or ox and sometimes by men, all the way to the carpenter's yard beside the castle. There, it'll be sawn down into beams and planks, shaped to precise measurements. But for now it's raw, massive, sleeping. The rest of the day is spent dragging. Your hands blister on the ropes, your feet slide in wet moss, and your breath hangs in the air like smoke. But as the sled creaks forward, you look back at the stump left behind and realise you just moved a piece of the castle. It may never bear your name, but it will bear weight. By the time the sled grinds into the castle yard, the sky has begun to darken at the edges. The timber team is already preparing the next phase, what the carpenters call dressing the wood. To you it means stripping, shaving, cutting, and shaping until the log no longer resembles a tree, but a beam ready to shoulder the dreams of a nobleman. You join a pair of workers at the saw pit, a long trench dug into the ground. One man stands above the beam, the other inside the pit, each gripping an end of a giant frame saw. The top man pulls up, the bottom man pulls down, over and over. Sawdust rains into the pit like flour coating hair, shoulders, tongue. The man beneath squints up at you and spits a mouthful. Better than lime dust, he mutters, before soaring again. Nearby, another crew is building a scaffold tower for the north wall. The design is ingenious. Horizontal ledges bound to vertical posts by twisted ropes and wooden pegs. No iron nails here. The joints must flex with the wind. And they do. You tested one last week by climbing to the 4th level. It swayed like a ship. Terrifying, but it held. One of the older workers tells you a story. Years ago, during a cathedral build, a scaffold collapsed when the ropes rotted through after a heavy rain. 3 masons fell to their deaths. Since then, every rope is inspected daily and no one climbs unless it's dry. You run your hand along one now, smooth, taut, slightly sticky with pitch. Secure. For now. In the carpenter's shed, smaller pieces are being crafted. A boy planes a board down to exact thickness. Another carves grooves for a dovetail joint. The precision here is almost holy. One beam even has a small carved mark. Your initials, if you dare. Some say it brings luck. Others say it tempts disaster. Outside, the treadwheel crane waits. You walk past its massive wooden cage, tall as a house, with steps inside like a hamster wheel. Tomorrow someone will climb in and walk to turn the drum, lifting stone with pulleys and counterweights. Without the carpenters there would be no wheel, no scaffold, no hoist, just rock and hope. But timber doesn't just lift. It braces, it holds, it fills in the soft parts that stone can't. Roofs, floors, walkways, window frames. You pass under the scaffolding and place a hand on one of the beams you helped haul. It smells like resin and sweat. It creaks under your touch, alive with strain. And here's something you didn't know. Some builders bury oak pegs in damp soil for months, on purpose, to pre-swell them. Then, once pounded into dry timber, the pegs shrink slowly, locking tighter than nails ever could. You see one worker soaking a bucket of pegs in water, humming to himself. He claims the wood needs to drink before it holds. That night, you sit near the cook fire with your back against a stack of lumber. It radiates warmth, even in the cold. You close your eyes, imagining the wood rising into rafters and towers, climbing with you. In your dreams, beams stretch like ribs overhead, and somewhere high above a banner unfurls. You built that too. The morning fog clings low as you step into the yard, breath puffing in short bursts. Today isn't for stone or timber, it's for motion. Grit, sweat and muscles that refuse to quit. You're back on the labour team. The unglamorous heart of the project. You're handed a shovel and directed to the southern trench. The foundations for a new curtain wall are going in, and they need a channel 2 feet deeper before it can be packed with gravel. Easy to say, not easy to do. The earth here is heavy with clay, thick as bread dough, and your first few stabs with the shovel bounce off like it's stone. You stomp the blade in with your heel and begin the rhythm. Push, lift, heave, push, lift, heave. The mud slurps as it gives way. Around you 10 others work in silence. The only sound is the scrape of iron and the low grumble of breath. Then come the carts. A pair of them, led by limping donkeys and cursing drivers, trundle up beside the trench. One holds gravel, the other lime powder. You squint as a gust sends a white cloud into the air. Lime burns if it touches skin. You grab a damp rag and tie it around your mouth. A trick the older workers taught you. The gravel is dumped first. You grab a wide rake and spread it across the trench base, crunching it flat. A good gravel bed means water won't pool. It means the wall above won't sink next spring and split like old bread crust. The master mason's apprentice comes by, holding a rod marked with inked lines. He checks your depth, gives a curt nod. It's right. You feel a small flicker of pride. He doesn't smile, but he doesn't frown either. Next comes the lime. You help mix it into the mortar pit, quick lime, sand and water. The mixture bubbles, hisses, steams. It smells like old eggs and wet fire. A man stirs it with a wooden pole, careful not to splash. Quicklime can blind. There's a story, probably true, about a builder in Kent who lost an eye when a fresh batch boiled over. Since then, no one jokes around the mortar pit. You load the mixture into buckets, hand over hand up the chain to the scaffold. The wall crew above takes it from there. Your job is to keep the flow steady. No mortar means no progress. The masons yell if you're late. They yell even louder if you're early and let it dry. Back on the ground, someone shouts. A wheelbarrow tips. Mortar splashes across a man's tunic. He screams and rips it off fast. Steam curls from his chest, bright red where the lime bit him. Others rush with buckets of water. You help hold him still. It could have been worse. Accidents are part of it. Everyone knows that. You've seen fingers lost to pulley ropes, feet smashed under stone, even one poor lad who broke his spine falling from the scaffold. He was gone before sunset. No one talks about it now, but every morning when you climb, you check your footing twice. Still you keep going. Push, lift, haul, muscles ache, skin peels. But the trench is ready. The gravel bed gleams, and the mortar flows. You won't be carved into a gargoyle. Your name won't be remembered. But every inch of progress today sits on your shoulders. The day wears on, and the rhythm never stops. You barely notice when the sun shifts overhead, only that the shadows stretch longer and your arms feel heavier with each trip to the mortar pit. You develop a kind of second sight, knowing when to duck under a swinging bucket, when to catch a slipping rope, when to grab a shovel before the foreman points your way. At some point you realize your hands are shaking, not from fear, from fatigue. They tremble slightly when you lift your drinking cup. When you tie the leather around your waist, you smile dryly. That means you're working right. You pause just long enough to eat a boiled egg and half a chunk of oat bread. Stolen time, really. Food tastes like earth and sweat out here, but it fills you. The break doesn't last. The lime mortar thickens too fast if left unattended. You're back on your feet in minutes. Near the West Tower, a team is raising a temporary ramp. You're pulled into the work. It's not fancy, just packed dirt, old planks and gravel. But it lets wheelbarrows climb to the second floor level without needing a pulley. The angle has to be just right. Too steep, and it becomes a death slide. As you lay the planks, you glance up and see something that stirs your chest. The castle is rising. Where last week there was only an uneven ring of rock, now you see the beginnings of a wall walk, the curve of a stair, a shadow that might be a future window. It's still skeletal, wood and stone lashed with rope, but it's becoming. And you helped. A few yards away, another team is tamping earth inside the lower bailey. They're using wide wooden poles with flat bottoms, stomping and slamming them in unison to compress the soil for future flooring. It sounds like distant drums, a strange music. You feel it in your spine, and here's a fringe bit you didn't expect. Some teams mix horsehair or even blood into their mortar. The old hands swear it makes the paste stronger. Others say it's superstition, a kind of offering to the stones. You don't ask what's gone into today's batch, but the colour's a little off. Later you're assigned to help test the scaffolding for the next level. It's not glamorous. You climb, you bounce gently on the planks. If it groans or sags too much, the carpenters make adjustments. If it holds, you keep climbing. You're sweating by the time you reach the top, and terrified. From here, the world tilts. You see the far hills, the village roofs, the winding river you used to fish in as a boy, and you see the castle. Really see it. Not as a pile of jobs or aching muscles, but as a thing taking shape. Curving towers, rising walls, shadows deepening between stones that you helped set, mortar you mixed, beams you carried. It's quiet up here. Just the wind and the occasional gull. You breathe in, heavy and slow. Below, the yard is still a blur of motion. Someone shouts. A bell rings for the meal shift. But up here, time stills for a moment. You plant your boots, grip the rail, and know this much. It's being built. And so are you. The air is cool this morning, but not cold. There's a strange hush across the yard. No shouting, no clatter of chisels just yet. You hear only the steady creak of rope and the low rumble of a drum beat. Thud, thud, thud. Slow, measured, almost hypnotic. Then you see it. The treadwheel crane. It towers over the southeast wall, a massive wooden wheel nearly twice a man's height, connected to a system of ropes, pulleys, and a spindle wound with thick hemp. The wheel turns, lifting a block of stone into the air like a feather, or so it seems from the ground. But you know better. Today, it's your turn inside. You'd hoped the day would never come, truth be told. The crane looks simple enough. Wood, rope, nails. But it's alive in its own way. It groans under pressure, sways with every gust of wind. The man inside must keep perfect balance. One misstep and the wheel locks. The stone jerks mid-air, and everything, scaffold, pulley, even workers, could come crashing down. A carpenter ties a leather strap around your waist. Don't run, he mutters. Just walk, slow, like grinding grain. You nod, unsure if your legs will obey. The wheel creaks as you climb the short ladder to the entry platform. From here, the inside looks like the rim of a ship's barrel. Spokes radiating from a central axle, with wooden cleats set inside for your feet. You step in, place one foot ahead of the other and wait for the call. Lift coming, someone shouts below. Then, walk, you begin. At first it's awkward. Your boots slip on the smooth wood, and the rhythm feels unnatural, but as the spindle creaks and the rope tightens, you find your pace, one step, then another. The weight of the stone makes itself known almost immediately. The wheel pushes back against your effort, slow but firm like dragging a stubborn mule. Outside the slats you catch glimpses of the yard falling away, the scaffold rising alongside the lifted block. You don't look down. You focus on your feet. Each step must be sure. The wheel cannot stop mid-turn, not with a full stone hanging. Your breath quickens. Sweat beads at your neck. You feel your calf muscles burning. Still, you walk. Still, the block climbs. There's a curious feeling, almost like you've stepped out of your body. As the wheel turns, you are both engine and man. The ropes sing with tension. The crane moans softly. And above all, you can hear the faint voice of the mason calling instructions from the upper scaffold, guiding the block into place with the same care a mother uses to swaddle a child. Then, hold. You stop walking. The wheel coasts for half a turn, then settles. You listen for the sounds below, the hammer tap, the shout of approval, the sigh of ropes unwinding. Lower. You step backward now, slowly. The weight shifts. The rope unwinds with a low growl. You move like a dancer in reverse, deliberate and focused. By the time you climb out, your legs are trembling. You're soaked through. But the block is in place. Square, snug, perfect. No accidents. No broken stones. No broken men. Someone slaps your back. Not bad for a first run, they say. You grin, still dizzy. From inside that wheel, you weren't just moving stone. You were raising a wall, lifting the future. Once your feet return to solid ground, the world feels strange. Too still, too slow. Your legs wobble like water. Every step buzzes with the memory of motion, but there's no time to rest. Another block is waiting, and another after that. The crane does not sleep. You're not going back inside today, thank the saints, but now you're part of the lifting crew. That means guiding the ropes, checking the lashings, and anchoring the counterweights. The system looks simple. A wheel, a rope, a drum. But every piece has to work in harmony, or the entire crane becomes a death trap. The pulley blocks are massive, each carved from oak and reinforced with iron bands. You run your hands over one, feeling the deep grooves where the rope slides. Smooth, but worn. Some say these pulleys come from shipyards, repurposed from failed naval projects. You like that idea. The castle, after all, is its own kind of ship, a vessel of stone meant to weather a different kind of storm. You help the carpenter adjust the balance weights. These are barrels filled with rocks, attached to the crane's counterarm. Too light, and the load will crash. Too heavy, and the treadwheel walker might lose control and be flung against the wall like a rag doll. Balance is everything. As the next block lifts, you're on the guide rope. You keep it taut, easing the swing of the stone as it rises, stabilizing it in the air. It's an eerie feeling, controlling something so heavy with just your hands and a few coils of hemp. The block spins slowly, as if curious about the world. You hold steady. A voice calls from the wall. Bring it left. You adjust. Now hold. You dig in your heels. The pulley groans. The stone hovers. Up top, two masons brace with crowbars and ease the block into place. You watch as the treadwheel slows, the crane settles, and a small cheer rises from the scaffold. Another piece added. Another step forward. During a break, one of the old lifters tells you a legend, probably nonsense, that some cranes were haunted, not by ghosts, but by memories. If someone died inside the wheel, their rhythm stayed behind, creaking the wheel ever so slightly at night. It's the wheel remembering them, he says, eyes serious. You laugh, but that night, you do think you hear something moving when no one's around. The crane itself is a marvel. Built entirely without nails, every joint is pegged, wedged, or lashed with rope. It's designed to disassemble and move as the castle grows. When the tower climbs another story, the whole wheel will be taken down, shifted, rebuilt higher up. A giant climbing with the walls. You run your hands along the framework and realize it flexes. Just slightly. Not stiff like stone. The entire machine breathes with the wind, sighs under strain, and groans when the load tips too fast. It's alive in its own way, and you were inside it. As twilight falls, the last stone of the day settles into place. The crane stops. The rope goes slack. A warm breeze rolls through the yard and the scaffold creaks as if exhaling. You sit nearby and watch it. All of it. The crane, the scaffold, the stones. None of this would rise without rope, balance, and walking in circles. Funny how building upward so often begins by walking in a wheel. The next morning starts before sunrise. You're not lifting stone today or walking the wheel. You're being loaned to the mortar crew where things stink a little more and bubble a little louder. You follow the foreman to a quiet corner of the yard, where a dozen fire pits smoke like sleeping beasts and rows of wooden tubs steam gently in the cool morning air. This is the alchemy of castle building. Not gold from lead, but solid walls from dust. And it all starts with lime. The quicklime is dangerous stuff. You've seen it handled before. White powder so fine it floats like flour, but burn your hand with it and you'll scream for days. The lime burners wear cloths tied over their mouths and smear grease under their eyes to keep the sting away. One even wears a scrap of sheepskin across his brow to stop thoughts from leaking out, he says. You're not sure he's joking. You're shown to the lime kiln, a large brick-lined pit shaped like a beehive. Logs are stacked inside and limestone chunks, fist-sized and pale, are heaped above the flame. It burns for hours, days sometimes, until the rock changes. The fire strips the stone of its calm. It hisses, spits, and finally cracks. What's left is quicklime, fragile, powdery, hot to the touch. It will eat through leather if spilled. Your job is to move it, carefully. You shovel the white lumps into a sloped tub where they're mixed with water and sand. And then comes the magic, or madness. The lime reacts with the water instantly. It hisses and boils like a beast awoken, sending clouds of steam into your face. You turn away, coughing. Your cheeks sting, your nose runs, but you keep shoveling, stirring the mess with a long-handled paddle. What emerges hours later is mortar. Thick, chalky, and binding. Not glue, but close. It will hold stones together for centuries, outlasting kings and builders alike. But not all recipes are the same. One man adds goat hair, says it gives the mix spine. Another swears by a splash of beer. The yeast helps it cure, he insists. You're not sure he just didn't want to finish his cup. There are whispers that in distant places, France maybe, they've used milk, eggs, even ox blood, anything to make the walls hold stronger. The apprentice mason passes by, dips a trowel into one of the fresh batches, and watches how it clings. Too wet, he mutters. You add more sand. He nods, just barely. High praise. Later, you help cart buckets of the finished mix up to the masons. One by one, they empty it between the stones, smoothing, tapping, scraping it flush. The sound is rhythmic, almost soothing. But you can tell when something goes wrong. A too wet mix? The stone slides out of place. Too dry? It crumbles in sunlight. Getting it right is harder than it looks. The best crews leave no gaps. Their walls are smooth, strong, breathing with tension. You touch one as you pass and feel the warmth still radiating from yesterday's work. It's strange to think the sticky mess burning your hands this morning will harden into a fortress. But that's the magic of mortar. It begins in chaos. Smoke, fire, steam, and ends in permanence. You wipe your arms with a damp cloth. Your skin is blotchy and red. Tomorrow it may blister, but the wall won't. As the day continues, you're moved to the mixing trench behind the east scaffolds. This is where the mortar gets one last stir before climbing up in buckets to the masons. The trench itself is lined with old planks, slick with dried lime and grit. You take up a long rake and begin the process again, turning, folding, smoothing. The rhythm is mind-numbing, but there's a quiet comfort to it. The sound of the rake dragging through the mix, the clack of pebbles caught beneath, the smell, sharp, acrid, earthy. It's the scent of something alive, something transforming. Not unlike bread dough, if bread dough could strip your skin and blind you in a single splash. Someone near you is whispering. You lean in. He's an old burner named Willem, and he's muttering about the ghost mix. Says a mason once added ash from a dead man's fire into the mortar. Swore it made the walls stronger, less prone to cracking. You laugh. He doesn't. He claims that building never collapsed, not even in the Great Storm. You don't know whether to scoff or stir more carefully. In the late afternoon, a test wall is being built. Just a short span, no higher than a man's waist. A practice run for the new apprentices. You're invited to help. Your first time laying stone. You kneel, scoop a dollop of mortar onto the foundation stone, and place your block carefully. It's not heavy, not like the giants hold for towers, but it's real. You slide it into place, press it down, and scrape the sides clean. It feels oddly precise, like sealing something into history. The apprentice next to you lays his block crooked. The master mason sees it from 20 paces away. He doesn't shout. He just walks over, taps it once with his hammer, and the whole thing falls away. "Again," he says. The boy nods, ashamed. Your block holds. The sky is gold by the time the last batch is used. Buckets hang empty. The lime pit simmers quietly, covered now with a wooden lid to keep it from crusting over. You help carry the rakes and paddles back to the tool shed. The handles are warm from the day's labour, smooth from hundreds of hands. As you walk past the north curtain wall, you notice something you hadn't before. A small seam where two stones meet, just beneath a carved drain spout. The mortar there is darker, smoother, stronger. You ask one of the older masons about it. "Batch with horse dung," he says casually, "keeps it from cracking in frost." Then he walks off, whistling. You stare at the wall. That ugly brown patch is a hidden miracle. From the ground, no one will ever know what holds it together. But now you do. Later that night, you sit with the burners, around the fire. One of them plays a flute carved from a deer bone. Another is half asleep, mouth open, snoring softly. You stare into the flames and think of everything you stirred today. Lime, sand, hair, whispers, maybe even a secret or two. It's strange. You thought you'd be laying stones or hauling beams. But here, in the belly of the build, you found something else. You're the glue. The sky's overcast and the air carries a sharp tang of wood smoke. Not from cook fires or kilns, but from deeper in the forest, where today you've been sent to assist the blacksmith's runners. It's charcoal day. You expected hammers and anvils. Instead, you find yourself in a small clearing where several low, dome-shaped mounds rise like sleeping animals under layers of turf and mud. No flame, no furnace, just smoke, lazy tendrils leaking from holes at the top like breath from a nostril. This is where fire is made patient. Charcoal doesn't come from burning wood. It comes from cooking it, slow, smothered, starved of air. The burners explain it to you in gruff terms. Stack the wood right, cover it in earth, light it just so. Then wait. Days sometimes. If it burns too fast, you get ash. Too slow, you get rot. But done right, you get fuel that burns hot enough to melt iron. One of the men lifts the edge of a finished mound. Black gold, he calls it. Charcoal logs, light, dry, and hard as bone, spill out. You help load them into sacks lined with canvas. Each sack is precious. The forge back at the yard burns through a dozen a day. The path back is long, and the sacks jostle against your shoulders. But you don't mind. There's a quiet respect in this work. A strange sense that you're carrying the breath of the forest itself, turned into something that will shape hinges, tools, nails, and gates. When you return to the castle site, the forge is already alive. It crouches at the far edge of the yard, a squat stone structure with a wide-mouthed chimney and a glow that pulses like a heartbeat. The blacksmith stands nearby, stripped to the waist, apron blackened and curled from years of sparks. His arms are like branches, and his face is smeared with soot except for the clean lines around his eyes where the sweat runs clean. You watch as he lifts glowing tongs and pulls a length of iron from the coals. It's orange, nearly white at the tip, and hisses when he lays it across the anvil. With a few rhythmic strikes, the bar flattens, lengthens, curves. It's a hinge now, or the beginning of one. He nods to you. "Bellows," he says. You step up to the lever and begin to pump. The wind rushes into the fire, feeding it. The flames leap higher, curl and twist. You feel the heat against your cheeks, your teeth, your fingertips. And suddenly you understand why charcoal matters. The blacksmith doesn't speak much, but he works like he's part of the forge. Every movement exact, every strike ringing with clarity. He doesn't just make tools, he births them. You see racks of chisels, clamps, long tongs, curled spikes, each one essential. Without nails, scaffold beams fall. Without hinges, doors fail. Without clamps, stone slips. He shows you a twisted hook used to hang buckets on the crane. Simple but critical. You ask if he ever makes weapons. He snorts. Not yet. That comes later. Build first, kill later. You nod. For now, the fire is for creation. Later in the day, you're tasked with helping the blacksmith's apprentice, barely older than you, but already missing 2 fingernails and speaking with a rasp from years near the smoke. He hands you a bucket of dull, misshapen tools, chisels chipped at the edges, pry bars bent like question marks, nails pulled from collapsed scaffoldings. We fix or melt, he says. Depends on how bad the damage is. You carry them to the grindstone, where the apprentice begins sharpening each piece with practice flicks of the wrist. The wheel spins with a squeal and a shower of sparks. You help turn the crank, slow, steady, and listen to the rhythm of iron hissing against stone. It's a strangely satisfying sound, like rain tapping a roof, like whispering thunder. The apprentice shows you how to test a tool's temper, heat it till it glows, plunge it into water, then strike it gently on the edge of an anvil. If it rings true, it's good. If it thunks dull or chips again, it's flawed. Some iron wants to be strong, he says. Some just wants to crack. You spend the afternoon reshaping, flattening bent hooks, reforging latches, stretching rods. The forge bellows rise and fall with each order from the masons. You're making specialized clamps today. Curved jaws that hold stone blocks together while the mortar sets. Without them, everything slips. And here's something odd. One of the clamps you're shown is curved like a crescent and fitted with a socket that doesn't seem to fit anything. You ask what it's for. The blacksmith shrugs. French thing, he mutters. Some lord saw it once on a bridge in Anjou. Wants one in his castle now. Doesn't matter if it works, just matters it looks clever. Even in stone, fashion matters apparently. You help the smith forge a hinge for the future gatehouse. It's enormous, thicker than your wrist and twisted at the ends like horns. You're told it will be visible from the outside, so it must impress. Form and function, says the blacksmith, but form pays better. As the sun dips low, you're shown a final piece, a wrought iron weather vane in the shape of a bird. Falcon, the apprentice says, Lord's sigil. You lift it carefully. It's lighter than it looks, delicate at the wingtips, and balanced on a single pivot point. The smith made it in one evening. It'll sit atop the highest turret one day, catching wind from all 4 corners of the kingdom. You wonder what else the forge will send into the air. Before supper, you help quench the fire. The forge is left to die slowly, its belly glowing red beneath the ash. The air smells of burned wool and hot metal. Your clothes are singed. Your hands ache. But you feel stronger somehow, like the iron rubbed off. Back in your bunk, you run your fingers over a small hook the apprentice let you keep. A bent nail you hammered into a curve and cooled yourself. Useless, really. Won't hold. Anything heavier than a sock. But it's the first thing you've made that might last. And maybe, one day, someone will find it inside a crumbled wall and wonder who made it. You wake to the sound of pulleys squealing and voices calling in rhythm. It's not the usual chant of stone hauling or scaffold building. This is something else, mechanical, deliberate. You step into the yard and see a crew clustered around the gatehouse trench, their sleeves rolled, brows furrowed in concentration. Today, you're joining the castle's quiet magicians, the drawbridge engineers. At first glance, it just looks like a pit. Timbers, chains, 2 large wheels laid out on either side. But to the masons and engineers hovering nearby, this is the beginning of something complex. A drawbridge is not simply a plank you pull up. It's a dance between gravity and control, levers and balance. Get the math wrong, and the bridge might fall too fast or never rise again. The master engineer is already here. You've seen him before. Clean hands, nimble fingers, always sketching. He speaks little, but his eyes track everything. You hear snippets as he explains the plan. Pulleys doubled for mechanical advantage, counterweights to ease the load, reinforced timbers to absorb shock. To you, it sounds like sorcery. To him, it's geometry. You're handed a rope and shown to the treadle wheel, not for lifting stone this time, but for testing tension. A helper walks inside it, slowly turning, while you feed the rope through a carved groove in the timber. The chain on the other side rises, clinks, settles. You're told to mark how far it travels. This matters. Everything here is measurement. Nearby, carpenters are preparing the bridge planks. Thick beams, carved and planed smooth, not just for strength, but to fit the axle precisely. The bridge must move without jamming. They coat the hinge points in grease, boiled pig fat thick as glue, to reduce friction. Here's the wild part. The engineer insists on adding 2 small barrels filled with sand as part of the bridge mechanism. They act as adjustable counterweights, shifting the balance depending on the bridge's moisture and age. If the wood swells during rain, the sand is tipped out to match the mass again. Brilliant and strange. You help load the barrels into place, securing them with thick leather straps. They dangle from a beam just inside the gate, swaying gently like sleepy eyes. Then comes the test. The bridge itself isn't built yet, but the arms are in place. The axles, the chains, the pivoting timber beams. You brace your boots and grip the main rope as the wheel turns. Slowly the arms lift. One side rises, then settles. The rope holds. The pulley turns. No snapping, no groans. The whole thing hums with tension like a bowstring drawn and ready. There's cheer, quiet, more like a nod between old friends, but it feels like triumph. Later, you help haul the planks that will become the bridge's floor. Each one is checked twice for warping. If they don't lie flush, the whole mechanism could catch. The final surface isn't just functional, it's symbolic. The bridge is the first thing a guest sees, and the first thing raised in defence. The master engineer places a carved falcon crest on the outer beam. Just a small touch. Most won't notice, but you will. You're building more than walls now. You're building trust, one chain at a time. The following morning you're back at the gatehouse before first light, the mist still clinging to the moat like a second skin. Today, the drawbridge will be laid across the gap for the first time. Not as a symbol, not as a trial, but for real. The wooden deck has been assembled piece by piece. Massive beams side by side pinned with iron bolts, their edges shaved so finely they look like one continuous surface. As you stand with the crew at the edge of the trench, it's hard not to feel nervous. The pit below is lined with jagged stones waiting to catch whatever fails. The engineer gives the signal. With slow, synchronized movement, you and 3 others begin feeding the bridge's chains into place. The timber arms creak. The pulley groans. The chain clinks, links tightening one after another as the bridge begins to tilt forward. Its own weight helps it descend. You hold your breath. The first edge touches down with a heavy thud. Dust jumps, wood flexes, then settles. Perfect fit. The men exhale all at once like a single lung. You step forward and walk across the length of it. It bounces slightly beneath your boots, then holds steady. The chains sway gently. The balance barrels you hung yesterday bob, compensating for the shift. It works. Later, as others test it, rolling carts across, even leading a mule over, you notice something odd. The engineer is under the bridge, face tilted upward, staring at the axles. You crawl under to join him. He points to a groove in the timber, a faint one, where the chain rubbed a fraction too deeply. It's small now, he says, but give it 6 months and the wear will jam the lift. He calls for the blacksmith's apprentice. Within an hour, the engineer has a solution. A small iron sleeve to guide the chain and absorb friction. Just a thin curl of metal, but it could save the bridge. You help bolt it in. And here's the strange thing. It's not just about keeping the drawbridge moving. It's about showing others that this castle breathes and flexes and thinks. Visitors might not notice the chain guide, but soldiers will. Merchants, messengers. They'll know this fortress is clever, not just strong. You're asked to help rig the portcullis next. It's a beast. An iron-toothed gate twice your height, designed to drop like judgment. It moves on vertical runners, guided by grooves carved into the stone gatehouse walls. At its heart is a great wooden windlass, a crank that takes 3 men to turn. You wind it up slowly, testing its weight. The teeth gleam, the chains hiss. A pile of straw is set beneath. The gate is dropped. The crunch is instant. Straw becomes powder. One man mutters, "Imagine bones." You don't have to. But that's the point. The castle is more than a home. It's a machine. Every bridge, every pulley, every hidden counterweight tells a story of control. Who gets in, who stays out, who never leaves. As the day fades, you walk across the finished drawbridge one last time, listening to the creak of the timbers beneath your steps. You pause at the centre, glance back, then forward. You helped build the threshold between safety and danger, and that line now moves, on your command. You've spent so many days staring at castle walls from the outside, hauling stone, mixing mortar, guiding ropes, that you've never truly looked at them from within. Not until now. This morning, the foreman leads you past the scaffolds and cranes, through the half-finished gatehouse, and into the heart of the rising keep. You pass under an archway newly set with a keystone that still smells of lime. Inside, it's cooler, darker. The air shifts. You're inside the wall. At first, it's hard to tell what you're seeing. The passage feels too narrow, the ceiling too low, the light too thin. But then the mason speaks. This is a hollow wall. You blink. The castle's outer walls are not monoliths. They're 3 layers, stone, rubble, stone. A sandwich, more or less. The outer layers are finely dressed blocks. The inner core, packed with crushed rock, broken bricks, bits of failed stonework and thick mortar. It's cheaper, faster, lighter, and done right, nearly as strong. You place your hand on the inner stone. It's damp, not from a leak, but from breath. These walls move moisture, they flex, they sweat. A living skin wrapped around the skeleton of the fortress. The mason taps a block with his hammer. "Hear that?" he asks. You do. It rings, not hollow, but not solid either. He chips away a small section of mortar to reveal the rubble beneath. Pieces of quartz, old red sandstone, even a seashell embedded like a fossil. Every scrap has a story. You follow him up a spiral stair set between the inner and outer shells of the keep wall. It's tight, shoulders brushing stone, and dark, lit only by arrow-slit openings called loopholes. You pause halfway up and glance through one. The view is narrow, purposeful, just enough to fire a bow through, not enough for anyone outside to return the favour. Here's a detail you hadn't noticed before. The outer wall leans inward slightly. A batter, the mason explains, sloped to deflect incoming arrows or stones from a catapult. More than that, it shifts weight back into the wall itself, reinforcing the structure. Smart, subtle. You reach the next level where 2 men are working on a curved turret wall. This one's different, not packed with rubble, but layered with an intentional air gap between inner and outer faces. Keeps the cold out, someone explains, and gives space for spies to listen, another laughs. You laugh too, but only a little. The master mason arrives to inspect the progress. He runs his hand along the seam between 2 courses. Tight, he says. That's all. Then he kneels, draws a small chalk line on the inner wall and speaks to no one in particular. That's where the hearth goes. A fireplace inside the wall. You didn't think of that. It will need its own flue, its own chimney carved between the stones without compromising the structure. A maze within a maze. Suddenly you see the walls differently. They're not just defences, they're rooms, pathways, channels of air and heat. Not barriers, but blueprints. And you're standing inside the lungs. You trail behind the master mason as he moves deeper into the unfinished keep, tracing the inside curve of the wall with his fingertips. It's quiet here, insulated by several feet of stone and rubble. You realise you can't hear the outside world anymore. No carts, no cranes, no foreman yelling, just your boots on flagstones and the occasional hollow drip of water. He stops suddenly, crouching beside a slit carved into the wall. It's not a window. It's too narrow, too strange. He beckons you closer. Drainage, he says. Every wall must breathe and bleed. You lean in. It's a carved spout leading from the upper floors, carefully angled to send water away from the foundations. Without these, rain collects. Walls soften, freezes, cracks. Even a fortress needs a way to weep, he murmurs, standing again. Around the next corner, a pair of carpenters are installing floor beams. You'd never guess it from outside, but these walls aren't solid all the way through. They have sockets, stone recesses, cut in advance to receive timber beams. These create the floor structure, like ribs slotting into a spine. Without them, there's no upstairs, just empty towers. The lead carpenter slides a squared beam into the socket. It fits snug. No nails, no gaps, just gravity and precision. You help steady the opposite end while he taps it flush with a mallet. You hear the echo carry through the wall like a drum. Later, you pass through a narrow passageway carved within the thickness of the wall. This is no hallway. It's a chemin de ronde, a wall walk. Archers will use it one day, pacing between arrow loops to defend the tower without exposing themselves. The floor beneath your boots is rough stone. The wall at your shoulder is just wide enough to rest your back against, bow in hand. But then you see something stranger still. A set of small, angled holes near the ceiling. The mason calls them putlog holes. You blink. They're for the scaffolds, he explains. We build them right into the wall, later we fill them. You realise the very scaffolding that held the castle during construction is accounted for inside the wall's bones, built-in impermanence. And then comes the final surprise of the day. You're led to what looks like a solid section of wall, no larger than a door frame. The mason presses a hand against one of the stones and murmurs, "False work." He gestures to a narrow gap, nearly invisible. This will be a hidden recess, for messages, or people. A secret chamber, inside the wall. Your mind reels. You thought you were building walls to keep people out. Now you see they're also designed to hide those within. Even as the light fades and you're called back to the yard, you keep thinking about it. These castle walls are not just obstacles, they are systems. They shift, breathe, drain, flex, and sometimes hide secrets. You step back outside and look again at the great stone skin encircling the keep. It no longer looks solid to you. It looks alive, like a beast with rooms in its ribs and whispers in its veins, and you are inside it. A chill wind cuts across the yard as you haul buckets toward the western bastion. Today's task isn't glamorous, or even particularly visible, but it's one of the strangest and most essential elements of the entire fortress, waterproofing. At first, it seems a contradiction. You've seen how much waterstone can take. The masons wet their blocks. Mortar mixes require it. And the moat, it laps right up to the castle's edge. But here, within the rising keep, water is a quiet enemy, unseen, patient and persistent. You're shown to the base of a new tower where a shallow basin has been carved into the stone floor. Not just a hollow for bathing or washing, but a cistern, designed to collect rainwater from the roof through a maze of hidden channels. It's clever, self-contained, and it must not leak. The master mason is already there, kneeling beside a bucket of curious black sludge. He doesn't look up as you approach. "Pitch," he says, tapping the bucket. Boiled pine tar, ash, a bit of tallow, keeps the water in or out. You're handed a long-handled brush wrapped in wool. The smell hits you like a punch, sharp, bitter, acrid. You dip the brush into the pitch and begin swabbing it across the base of the cistern. It spreads thick and sticky, clinging to your fingers even through gloves. The heat from yesterday's sun has warmed the stone, and the pitch bubbles slightly as it touches the surface. A good sign, it means it's sealing. You pause when you spot a crew working just overhead. They're lining the bottom of a sloped roof with sheets of lead. Not thick, not heavy, but carefully shaped into pans and joined with a kind of paste made from flour and vinegar. One of them waves down to you. "It's not just the moat you worry about," he calls, "it's the rain." You nod. Water seeps, it creeps, and in winter it freezes. A single crack in the roof can turn into a hairline split through the outer wall, and a leak in the wrong place. It can destroy grain, rot the beams, or send a floor tumbling from the weight of hidden ice. In the southeast corner, there's a more unusual sight. 3 men are testing a kind of pipe, clay tubes nested together and buried in a slope beside the curtain wall. You wander over and watch as one pours water into the top end. A minute later, it trickles from a spout 20 feet away. It's not for drinking. It's a drainage run, pulling water away from the foundations. You never thought castles had plumbing. But here it is. Primitive, clever, and vital. Then comes your next task. You're handed a bucket of something thicker than pitch and twice as foul-smelling. "Cattle dung and straw," the foreman says, far too casually. "Layer it behind the wall joints. Keeps wind out. Traps moisture." You blink. You heard me. You do as told, stuffing the fibrous sludge into crevices behind the scaffold, just above the arch of a narrow postern gate. It stinks. It stains. But once it dries, it becomes something like cement. Flexible, water-resistant, and insect-proof. You pause to scratch your arm, only to realise the mixture has dried across your sleeve in a crust. You sigh. Castles aren't built with pride alone. Sometimes they're held together with dung. As the afternoon settles in, the wind shifts. A cloud wall builds on the horizon, and the older workers begin muttering about rain. That's when everything speeds up. Not to escape the weather, but to prepare for it. Because rain changes everything. You're sent up onto the scaffold walkways with a bundle of rolled hides and wax canvas. Your job: cover the fresh mortar joints. If rain gets into them too early, it won't just wash away the work. It will undermine it, leaching out the lime, crumbling the bond between stones. You move fast, anchoring the sheets over open joints with smooth stones and bits of split timber. Below, the drainage team is hard at work, digging shallow trenches around the newly poured lime pits. They're setting up makeshift channels, just furrows in the dirt lined with bark, to direct water away before it pools. You notice one worker nailing small planks across an unfinished archway. "Rain falls sideways," he mutters. "Don't laugh, it finds its way in." And he's right. You've seen it. Rain seeps under eaves, drips down chimney shafts, even runs between scaffold boards to settle on the inside face of a wall that looked dry all morning. You're sent next to the base of the west tower to help seal a vault chamber. This one's meant to store grain, so it must be dry. The mason in charge mixes a coat of liquid plaster, made not with water but goat's milk and lime. He brushes it across the inner walls while humming an old song. You ask why the milk. Fat binds, he says simply. Stronger than water, sticks through frost. You want to laugh, but you don't. Because when he's done, the surface gleams like marble. At the far end of the yard, a group of women attending to the bedding under a newly framed roof. They're not building, not in the way you are, but they're stuffing straw and rags between ceiling beams, tucking them against the outer roof planks. Insulation, one says, when she catches your curious glance. Keeps the rot out, keeps the warmth in. It hits you then. The castle isn't just built to stand, it's built to breathe, to sweat, to dry, to hold out wind and draw in warmth. The walls shift with the seasons, the roof bends with the sun, the very mortar changes with the weather. Back on the scaffold you tighten the last canvas just as the first drops hit, and then comes the storm. Rain sweeps across the yard in sheets, buckets are overturned, workers duck into alcoves. You press yourself against the wall, eyes closed as the wind lashes at the tarp. But beneath your feet nothing shifts. The stones hold, the gutter grooves trickle, the pitch in the cistern darkens but doesn't run. The dung and straw seals don't give, it all holds. When the rain slows to a drizzle, you help lift the covers. The mortar is damp but intact. The vault chamber is dry, the grain safe, and the archway above the postern gate, not a drop inside. You return to your bunk soaked through, mud-caked and shivering. But there's a deep satisfaction curled in your chest, because today you saw what it means for a castle to resist nature, and tomorrow it'll be dry enough to build again. The sun rises late the next morning, lazy and pale behind veils of mist. Everything glistens, the scaffold boards slick with dew, mortar joints darkened by the storm, ropes and iron clamps still beading with moisture, but nothing has collapsed. No wall has buckled. That in itself feels like a quiet miracle. You're assigned to a different task today. Not lifting, not mixing, not climbing. You're going to live on site. Not just during work hours, but truly live, sleep, eat, and breathe within the construction itself. You and a small team of workers are moved into a temporary barrack tucked under the western curtain wall. Just a thatched lean-to against the rising stone, open to the yard on one side but shielded from the wind. The foreman says it's part of a new effort, keeping the core crew close day and night for faster progress and safer night watches. Your new neighbours are an odd bunch. 2 brothers from the quarries, a carpenter with a bad leg, and a lad who might be 12 or 20. It's hard to tell under the dirt. The 5 of you share a straw mattress spread over a base of discarded timber offcuts. There's no privacy, no chimney, just a fire pit near the door and a pot always boiling with something questionable. Your first real introduction comes at nightfall when supper is passed out from the castle kitchen. Stale barley cakes, a slab of salted pork and a ladle of onion broth. You eat in silence at first, exhausted. Then the quarrymen start telling stories, some true, most not, about stones that screamed when split and ropes that frayed only when a liar held them. You laugh. So does everyone else. The laughter is sudden, sharp, and more desperate than joyful. You recognize the sound. It's what people make when they're too tired to cry. You lie back later, staring up through the gap in the thatch roof. Stars peek through. You hear someone coughing, someone else muttering in their sleep. A rat rustles near your foot. You don't flinch. The rat doesn't bother you. The cold does. But oddly, the wall behind you doesn't. It radiates warmth. Not like a hearth, but like a massive beast that's absorbed sunlight all day and is now letting it go slowly. You press your shoulder to the stone and feel it hum faintly, solid and reassuring. Living inside the build teaches you things you'd never notice otherwise, like how the scaffold sings when the wind shifts after midnight. or how the mortar between new stones gives off a chalky smell when it rains, or how the creak of a gate chain at night sounds exactly like someone whispering your name. The foreman says it's good training. You say it's a bit like madness. Still, by morning you've learned the rhythm of the site in a different way. You no longer wake with the whistle. You wake before it, stirred by the low groan of carts arriving, or the flicker of torches along the half-built wall. You belong here now, not just as a worker, but as part of the bones. By the third night in the barrack, something shifts in your senses. You no longer flinch at the rasp of saws before dawn, or the clatter of buckets outside your door. The snoring of the quarrymen becomes a rhythm. The scent of burnt fat and wet rope fades into the background. You're no longer visiting the build, you're woven into it. You start to notice how the castle lives at night. Not the way lords imagine it, with candles flickering in windows and guards pacing in polished boots. No, it breathes in quieter ways. The settling of timber scaffold in the wind, the slow drip of lime water from buckets left out, the sleepy moan of a tired ox kicking at its yoke in a dream. You sit outside one evening with the carpenter and listen to the mortar walls ticking as they cool. He grins, like bones creaking after a long day. He's not wrong. That night a young boy, barefoot with a snot-crusted nose, arrives at your lean-to carrying a chipped bowl. "Water for the pot," he mutters, handing it over. You take it. Only later do you realise the water was caught in a basin at the base of the keep. Rainwater, channelled through the new gutter system. It tastes clean, cold. The castle is beginning to nourish its own. Inside the walls, more workers have begun sleeping on site, some in empty storerooms, others curled beneath canvas tied between scaffolds. The site has become a settlement, part fortress, part village. A mason's child plays with a chipped chisel like a toy. A labourer's wife mends a tunic using iron nails as pins. Someone's carved a face into one of the scaffolding poles, an ugly one. It watches you all day as you pass. And here's the truth no one says aloud. Sleeping in the shadow of the walls changes how you build them. You start laying stones as if you'll walk under them tonight. You mix mortar more carefully, knowing the floor above may creak above your own head. When a scaffold board splits under someone's step, you feel it like it's snapped beneath your own spine. You're no longer just building for a lord's vanity or some war in a far-off valley. You're building because this place must stand for you. One morning, you wake to frost on your boots. The carpenter beside you is already gone, off to mend a beam. The pot is still warm. The boy with the chipped bowl never came back. But you notice the gutter he drank from now has a neat, smoothed edge. Someone lined it with lead overnight. Little things like that begin to appear. A drain spout covered with a carved plank. A vent hole patched with cloth and beeswax. A bucket hung just where it needs to be. No one's taking credit. The castle is shaping itself, not just by design, but by habit, by need, by the people now wrapped in its stone skin. You lie back against the curved wall one evening, bones aching, shoulders stiff, and you hear laughter echo across the yard. Someone's singing an old tune. You catch a rat sniffing your crust of bread. You don't move, because somehow it's all part of the build. Not just the stone, but the silence, the filth, the songs, the sleep. The rumour reaches you before the riders do. A whisper, passed between bucket lines and scaffold planks. The Lord is coming. At first, it barely registers. Lords visit all the time, don't they? You've seen nobles ride by the castle site before, stiff in their saddles, surrounded by men with sharper armour than wit. They peer at the walls like squinting at a map, nod solemnly, and ride off before the dust settles. But this is different. This lord isn't just inspecting. He's the patron. the name etched into the future gate, the one paying for every cartload of stone, every wedge of cheese, every aching spine. He's coming here, and suddenly the entire site shifts. Carts are cleared, buckets are stacked in tidy rows, mortar pits are skimmed smooth, even if no one will touch them today. The dung pile is discreetly shovelled behind a temporary plank wall. You're given a clean tunic. Well, cleanish. It still smells like lime, but at least it has both sleeves. By mid-morning, you hear the hoofbeats. Not many, just 6 or 7. But the sound cuts across the yard like a blade. Everyone stops. The Lord rides in like a sketch from one of the mason's parchments. High boots polished to a fault, cloak heavy with embroidery, a falcon pin glinting at his collar. His face is younger than you expected, sharper. The kind of man who notices if a wall leans a finger's width too far. Beside him rides a clerk, older, with a scroll case under one arm and ink stains across 3 fingers. They dismount near the gatehouse, and then they just stand there, looking. It's unnerving. The master mason appears within seconds, robe stiff with dust and chalk but composed. He bows. The Lord doesn't bow back. Instead, he gestures toward the southern bastion and starts walking without a word. The master follows. So does half the yard. At a distance, you find yourself drawn along with them, trailing just behind the tool shed, close enough to hear snatches of conversation. "Angle here looks off," the Lord is saying. The master responds calmly. Intentional. The tower flares to meet the inner curtain, not the outer. A pause. Show me. They climb a short stair, stone, not yet paved, and stand atop a scaffold overlooking the moat. From here, the shape of the entire wall can be seen. Not a square, but an asymmetrical curve like a flexed arm, designed to deflect siege engines. Clever. The Lord squints into the distance. And the gatehouse, will it allow for 5 horses side by side? The mason doesn't blink. 4 with armour, 5 without, unless your lordship slims the horses. A few muffled chuckles behind you. The Lord doesn't laugh, but he does smile, a little. Then comes the real test. He turns suddenly and gestures at the wall you helped build last week. "What's behind that section?" The mason replies, "Hollow chamber with a flue and water channel. Show me." And just like that, you're following a lord into a castle wall. The passage into the wall is narrow, dim, and still slick from last night's rain. The Lord doesn't hesitate. He ducks beneath a low beam and steps into the hollow chamber like he's inspecting a wine cellar. You and 2 others follow, keeping your backs to the damp stone and your mouths shut. It's quiet in here. The air is warmer than outside, and faint trickles of runoff still seep down one edge, where the mortar hasn't cured fully. The flue is visible overhead, a dark slit winding upward through the masonry like a secret throat. The master mason gestures with a gloved hand. Drainage runs beneath the chamber. The hearth will go here. He taps the wall. A second flue exits above the guardrobe shaft on the far end, drawing air across. Keeps the chamber dry, even in winter. The Lord crouches, runs his finger along the base of the wall and sniffs. Then, to your astonishment, he presses his palm flat against the mortar and holds it there. You steal a glance at the master. He says nothing. His face is blank. But you can feel the tension in the room like a stretched rope. Finally the Lord stands. "It's warm," he says. "Even now." The mason nods. "The stone here was laid 3 days ago. It breathes slower. That's the trick." The Lord looks around again, eyes narrowing at the timber joints, the flue, the way the wall tapers toward the roof arch. He's not just posing. He's seeing it. The mechanics, the movement, the subtle way this chamber has been coaxed from lifeless rock. and then he does something no one expects. He laughs. Just once. Low and honest. He turns to the mason. "You've been clever." The mason bows slightly. "It is the castle that teaches, my lord. We just listen." Outside, the weather has shifted again. The wind has picked up and dust lifts in low spirals across the yard. The lord walks slowly through the site, stopping to examine a hoist, a carved window arch, even the oxen carts. He asks questions, sharp ones, but doesn't linger for answers. He's gathering, measuring, weighing. You're sent back to your post, but you keep your eye on him. When he reaches the forge, he kneels, not to warm himself, but to pick up a discarded iron clamp. He runs his thumb along the edge and hands it to the blacksmith's apprentice. "This one's too soft," he says. "Quench longer." He spots a worn rope holding the crane's pulley. "Change that before someone dies." He watches two workers carry buckets up a ramp and frowns. "We need a second tread wheel, don't we?" He doesn't stay long. By midday he's mounted again, cloak fluttering in the rising wind, and rides out with his clerk at his side. No fanfare, no parting speech, just a glance back at the rising tower, and the faintest nod. Then he's gone. The yard doesn't cheer. There's no sigh of relief, only a quiet hum of motion returning. Ropes creak, hammers resume, a bucket spills, and no, one laughs. But you feel it. The kind of pressure that comes not from punishment, but from being seen. Because now the man whose name will be carved above the gate has walked the bones of his castle, and you were there, sweating beside him, silent in the wall. The wind changes again. It carries a scent you've learned to recognize instantly. Chalk dust, cracked mortar, raw earth. But today, there's something else under it. Fear, not shouted, not written, but you feel it in the way men walk more slowly, how they check their footing twice before climbing, how the foreman's voice stays just a little too calm. You don't need to be told what's happened. You see it. The north curtain wall, barely 2 weeks from completion, has shifted. A lean, subtle, but undeniable boss out near the top where fresh stones meet the older base. It wasn't like that yesterday, and once you see it, you can't unsee it. You ask around quietly. The mortar cured too fast. The foundation settled wrong. Someone used a cracked block. No one agrees. Everyone speculates. The master mason appears in silence. His robe trails mortar flecks, and his eyes are locked on the bulge in the wall. He doesn't speak. He just stands, staring at it. Finally he turns to the foreman and says, "Clear the scaffold." No one hesitates. Within minutes the planks are stripped, buckets lowered, ropes coiled. The workers evacuate that section like ants leaving a shaken hill. You're told to help remove the loose stone from the top row. It's dangerous. You're pulling from a structure that may decide to collapse at any moment. Every sound, every creak, groan, crack makes you flinch. The fourth block you touch shifts under your grip. You freeze. "Drop it," someone yells. You do. The stone falls, only a few feet, but when it lands the wall shudders, just slightly. A wave through the scaffold, a ripple through your ribs, and then silence. No collapse, not yet. You keep going. By mid-morning, a chunk of the wall, nearly 3 layers deep, is dismantled. It feels like betrayal. You've spent weeks hauling stone, mixing mortar, pressing block to block with aching arms. Now you're undoing it, pulling out your own work like rotted teeth. But this is what building means. You don't just create, you correct. The mason traces the crack with a stick of charcoal. It slithers down the wall like a river, ending in a hairline fracture at the base, nearly invisible, but deadly. That single flaw could have spread upward, pulled a whole section down, buried men, No one speaks of blame, not aloud. But glances dart toward a younger crew, new masons brought in last week. One of them hasn't returned since yesterday. Some say he panicked, others say he was sent away. The master doesn't comment. He kneels beside the fracture and taps the foundation with a wooden mallet. Once, twice, then a third time, much harder. The sound echoes wrong, hollow. The ground beneath the wall has sunk. You hear the verdict in his voice. The base was rushed, rebuild. And just like that, 2 weeks of labour vanish. You help carry the discarded stones to the edge of the yard. Some are too warped to reuse. Others will be chipped down and repurposed. None are wasted. Still, you can't help but feel like you're burying a body. When the sun begins to set, the master gathers the crew. His voice is low but clear. "This happens," he says. "What matters is how you fix it." Then he walks away. You look back at the broken wall, wrapped now in silence and shame. Tomorrow it begins again. Dawn returns with a sharpness to it. Not in the air, though the cold certainly bites, but in the way the yard moves. Every footstep feels more deliberate. Every scaffold rung is tested before climbed. The laughter, so often woven into morning routine, is gone. The north wall is now a pit of rubble, not disaster, not ruin, but failure, acknowledged and laid bare. You and a dozen others have been assigned to strip the last of it down to solid footing. The cracked stones are hauled off for chipping. The mortar, once proud and pale, is now a grey crust crumbling beneath your fingertips. You hear someone mutter behind you, "All that for nothing." You don't reply, because it's not true. Nothing is wasted here. The flawed stones will be turned into fill. The failed base will be packed tighter, layered slower, rebuilt with caution and shame. And that shame? That's the binding agent now, more powerful than lime. The master mason returns mid-morning with a measuring rod and a slate. He speaks less today, simply marks the trench, draws a new line, and gestures for the gravel to be brought in. He stands over every layer as it's tamped, every board as it's braced. No one dares cut corners now. There's nothing like a close call to make a team holy. And here's the strange part. This new wall is better, already. The stones fit more tightly. The angles are checked twice. The mortar is wetter, smoother, worked longer into the seams. You notice how the apprentice masons whisper measurements to each other now instead of just glancing. Pride can build a castle, but humility stops it from falling. By mid-afternoon, the first row of new stone is laid. The block is lifted by treadwheel, guided by ropes, placed with care. And when it lands with that clean, satisfying click, you hear the collective breath release. One stone, one victory, but not all damage is physical. You pass the younger mason who laid the faulty foundation. He's sitting alone, sharpening his trowel even though it doesn't need it. His eyes are red, not from tears, from exhaustion, from knowing everyone knows. You sit beside him. For a while, neither of you speak. Then he mutters, "I measured wrong, just by a thumb," you nod. "A thumb can break a tower." He stares at you. "Why'd they let me stay?" You think for a long time before answering, because you'll never make that mistake again. Later that evening, the wall has regained half its height. The scaffold creaks again with movement. The bucket chain resumes. The yard exhales, not in triumph, but in momentum, and that's enough. Before turning in for the night, you walk past the pile of rejected stones. Some have already been split into wedges, others rest, awaiting new purpose. You spot one block you remember laying yourself, now cracked, scarred, discarded. You run your hand over it. It wasn't your fault, but it was still yours. And maybe that's the truth of this entire place. You build, you fail, you rebuild. The wall doesn't forgive, but it lets you try again. You'd think that after so many weeks of hauling, cutting and stacking, you'd understand every trick these castle walls had to offer. But then one morning, you turn a corner near the eastern chapel and stop cold, staring up at something that looks like it belongs to another world. An arch, but not like the ones you've seen before, rounded and Roman, heavy, brute bent like a yoke. This one rises in a point, sharp and elegant, its ribs crossing high above like the fingers of clasped hands. "You're looking at a vault," says a voice beside you, the master mason. You nod slowly, unable to look away. "Gothic," he adds, almost gently. "New thinking, new balance." You don't understand the math behind it, not yet. But you can feel it in your bones. This is more than structure. It's grace in stone. The vault is part of the chapel roof, still unfinished but already breathtaking. Carved ribs of limestone sweep upward from thick piers and meet at a single keystone, suspended in mid-air like a puzzle piece that solved itself. You're told it holds weight not by brute force, but by distribution. Each rib pushes against the next. Each curve shares the burden. It's like watching gravity make a truce with beauty. Your job today is simple. Carry the ribstones to the scaffold team one by one. They're lighter than wall stones, but trickier. Each must be carved to precise angles, curved like slices of melon, their edges beveled just so. You handle them as if they're glass. Above you, a crew is laying the ribs in careful order, like spokes in a wheel. They work in silence, save for the occasional murmur of numbers and the soft clack of measuring sticks. Each rib is joined by temporary wooden frames, centering they call it, which hold the curve in place until the keystone is set. Only then will the arch hold itself. You ask what happens if the centering is removed too early. The mason just raises an eyebrow. You don't ask again. Later, you help chisel away the final corner of the pier where one rib will rest. You're guided by a charcoal sketch made days ago, the lines smudged by fingers and time. The cut has to be exact. No guessing, no close enough. If it's even a finger too short, the arch won't meet. If it's too long, the rib will snap from stress. That's the terrifying thing about Gothic design. It's less forgiving, more daring. It lets you build higher, lighter, more beautifully, but only if every piece sings in harmony. It's a cathedral held up by trust. And here's something the mason tells you in passing, something you won't forget. A Roman arch can survive war. A Gothic vault survives doubt. You don't ask what he means, you just feel it. By afternoon, the final rib is placed. The scaffold creaks, the ropes tighten, and then the keystone is lifted. A single block carved with a spiral, nothing too grand, just a twist of light and shadow. It settles into place with a muffled thunk. The centering is left in place for now, but you already know the vault is breathing. The next day you return to the chapel just after sunrise. The light spills through the eastern opening, no stained glass yet, just raw morning pouring across half-finished stone. Dust dances in golden shafts, and the vault you helped raise yesterday now glows like something alive. The centering still stands beneath it. The wooden ribs creak softly as the air warms, and the whole structure seems to hum, not with sound but with tension. You can feel it, as if the entire arch is holding its breath. Then comes the moment. The carpenter steps forward and begins loosening the centering, slowly, cautiously, one wedge at a time. Others join in, removing braces, tapping pins. A silence falls over the yard. Even the oxen seem to stop moving. You hold your own breath as the final support is lifted. Nothing happens, no collapse, no shudder, just balance. The vault holds, on its own. Weight distributed through curves and ribs, tension travelling like music through stone. You hear someone whisper, "It's floating." It's not, of course. It's heavier than anything you've carried. But for the first time, you understand how stone can pretend to fly. Later, you help with finishing work around the base, smoothing plaster, sweeping chips, fitting decorative bosses at the joints between ribs. One of them is shaped like a curled leaf. Another, a snarling beast with a mason's grin. A bit of humour tucked 60 feet above the floor, where only a hawk or a bold soul will ever see it. You ask why. The sculptor just shrugs. Because we can. By midday, the master mason gathers a few of you under the arch. He doesn't speak at first, just stands with his hands behind his back, eyes travelling upward. "You've built a ceiling," he says at last, "but you've also built a promise." You glance around, confused. He continues, "No lord asked for this vault, no scroll required it. It costs more, it takes longer, and yet it lifts the eye. It changes the way a man prays." You think about that, about how every person who enters this room, even decades from now, will look up. They won't know your name, they won't know the scaffolds or the sweat or the keystone nearly dropped in the mud, but they'll feel something. Wonder, maybe, or awe. You help remove the last of the timber frames, stacking the centering in a neat pile near the yard. They'll be reused, maybe for another vault, maybe for a small arch above the buttery. Either way, the skeleton has done its work. Before leaving, you walk back beneath the vault, alone. You stare up at the ribs, at the keystone spiral, at the soft curves of shadow stretching like fingers into the corners. It's quiet, still, but not dead. And here's the strangest part. For a moment you forget you're standing beneath something. You feel no weight above, no crush of stone, only space. That's the genius of it, the trick, the gift to turn stone into sky. By now, the castle looks almost complete, at least to the untrained eye. The outer walls stand proud and tall. The towers cast long shadows at sunrise. The gatehouse looms with quiet threat. But for those of you who have built it, there's still a strange sense of unfinishedness. Not in structure, but in spirit. Today you're carving that spirit in. You've been assigned to a stone detailing crew, masons, sculptors and decorators who've spent the last few weeks shaping the flourishes that will give the castle its identity. Not the bricks, not the beams, but the accents, the faces, and that's not a metaphor, because the gargoyles are coming. You're led to a shaded workspace tucked along the southern wall, where blocks of limestone rest like sleeping heads. But not for long. Already some of them have been chiselled into twisted shapes, elongated mouths, grimacing jowls, knotted brows and bulging eyes. These are no ordinary water spouts. These are guardians, grotesques and gossiping beasts. You pick up a chisel, awkwardly at first, and watch the master sculptor at work. He's an old man with a bent back and a voice like gravel. He doesn't talk much, just points and gestures, as if the stone speaks to him more clearly than people. He shows you how to carve a mouth open just wide enough for water to pass through, how to hollow the throat without weakening the spine. Every gargoyle has a purpose, to redirect rainwater from the roof and fling it far from the stone walls. Without them, the castle would rot from its own runoff, but function isn't the whole of it. They scare away spirits, one sculptor says, grinning with half his teeth missing. Or rats, or tax collectors. You laugh. You're not sure he's joking. You begin roughing the shape of your own. A squatting figure, half frog, half knight. You carve armour onto its squat belly and give it a ridiculous nose. No one stops you. In fact, one of the masons pats your shoulder and says, "Better than the last one. That one looks like a cow that lost an argument." You realise as you work that these faces will stare down at strangers for centuries, Rain will pour from their mouths. Birds will nest in their ears. Children will point at them and ask, "Who's that meant to be?" And no one will know. That's the freedom of it. No royal decree determines these carvings. They belong to the builders, the decorators, the workers who've had no say in the measurements of towers or the angle of battlements. But here they get to leave a whisper behind. Later in the day, you walk past the chapel again and see a small carved boss above the doorway, a face with wide eyes and a tongue stuck out. You recognise it instantly. It's the blacksmith's apprentice. You glance back toward the scaffold and see the apprentice in question looking up, stunned, while the sculptor walks away, whistling innocently. You smile. This place is becoming human. As the sun lowers and the light shifts golden across the walls, you carry your nearly finished grotesque to the scaffold beside the north turret. It's heavier than it looks. Even hollowed out, the limestone has a weight that speaks of permanence. You cradle it like a strange child, your frog knight with its gaping mouth and absurdly puffed cheeks, and haul it up rung by rung. 2 others are already being set into place nearby. A snarling cat with fangs longer than cents, and something that looks like a bishop crossed with a goose. No 2 are alike. That's the rule. That's the fun. You and the stonecutter guide your piece into the carved socket at the edge of the parapet. A splash stone sits just beneath to catch the cascade. With a few taps of the mallet and a smear of fresh mortar, your grotesque becomes part of the castle's skin. It stares out across the fields, tongue lolling. You wonder who it'll see in the centuries ahead. There's a certain thrill to it. Not pride, not quite. More like mischief. These figures will outlast all of you, and no one, not the lord, not the steward, not even the master mason, gets to edit them. They are the castle's inside joke, set in stone. Later that evening, as the scaffold clears and dinner calls, you linger behind to take a slow walk along the upper wall walk. The sun is nearly gone, but the gargoyles catch the last of the light, their edges glowing orange, their shadows stretched long like clawed hands across the masonry. You pass one shaped like a fat pig with bat wings, another that might be a baker, his cheeks swollen like dough. You reach the corner tower and spot one sculpted with a crooked grin and a chipped ear. It looks like your foreman. You chuckle. You're not sure who carved it, but you're sure he hasn't noticed yet. Then you see the master mason, standing at the far end of the wall, arms crossed, gazing up at a newly placed waterspout. It's a beautiful piece, subtle, elongated, elegant in its grotesqueness. Not wild, but weary. A face half turned away. You step closer. He doesn't look at you, just says, "That one's for my brother." You don't ask more. You don't need to. Because suddenly the whole meaning of the grotesques shifts. They're not just jokes, not just flourishes. They're memories, carved into a place too large to remember otherwise. Each one a person, a moment. A story that someone refused to let vanish into dust. You look back toward your frog knight. Maybe he'll never mean much. Maybe one day he'll wear away and fall, swallowed by time. But for now he watches over the gate, and for now that's enough. The horns sound at dawn, low, steady, and unmistakably strange. You sit up from your bedroll beneath the scaffold with a start. Around you, the yard is already stirring. The oxen are tied, the tread wheel is still. Masons and labourers are gathering near the gatehouse, brows furrowed. It's not danger, not yet, but it's a drill, a test. The Lord's men want to simulate a siege. You blink twice, not because it's a surprise, but because, until now, everything you've built has felt like a monument, a rising, glorious thing. Now suddenly it must survive. The steward walks the yard with a scroll, barking out rolls. Archers to the parapet, gate team to the wheelhouse. You get to the murder holes. You point to yourself and he nods. Yes, you. We're pouring gravel today, not boiling oil. Too expensive. So that's how it begins. The gate is dropped. The portcullis rattles into place with a satisfying clunk. The bridge is drawn up until it hangs in the air like a crooked jaw. You run with a bucket of dry gravel toward the tower stair, heart pounding, even though this is only practice. You pass a crew dragging carts behind the inner bailey wall. They're overturning them to form a makeshift barricade. One carpenter shouts about missing spikes. Another tosses down a load of caltrops, tiny iron stars made in the forge last week. Someone nearby is muttering about firing a warning shot. You don't ask what that means. You reach the murder holes, those narrow shafts carved into the ceiling of the gate passage, and peer down. Below, the other labourers are pretending to rush the gate, waving tools like clubs, whooping and stomping. It's absurd but effective. You grab a handful of gravel, toss it through. The clatter it makes on the stone below is shockingly loud. You imagine real stones, real fire, real men. You toss another. Then the horn sounds again, short, sharp, and doubled. Everyone freezes. That's not part of the drill. A runner appears, red-faced, panting. The bridge pulley jammed. In an instant the mood changes. What began as a game is now deadly serious. If the pulley fails during an actual siege, the entire fortress becomes a trap. For those inside, you scramble down the inner stair, skipping steps, shoulder slamming into stone. At the base, a crowd has already formed. The bridge hangs crooked now, one side stuck halfway down, the other still raised. The chains shiver with strain. You see the master engineer on his knees beside the pulley housing, hands deep in the gears. Ropes slip the axle, he growls. Too dry. No wax. You remember something. 3 days ago, the apprentice who was meant to oil the pulleys got pulled off to help haul stone. No one covered the task. Now, the entire gate is paralysed. A dozen men leap in to help. You do too. Grabbing wedges, easing the tension, reversing the crank to reset the chain alignment. It takes the better part of an hour, but eventually the bridge creaks back into motion and descends, level, slow, perfect. The horn sounds again. This time 3 long blasts. Test over. Everyone exhales. But something's different now. Something lingers. You glance up at the wall, the towers, the gate. This isn't just a home or a symbol, it's a weapon. The yard doesn't return to normal after the drill, not fully. There's a hush beneath the hammer blows, a new kind of awareness. You see it in the way the masons eye the parapets, in the way the steward paces the length of the inner wall, measuring with his boots, and you feel it too. Some small part of your mind replaying the sight of that jammed bridge, tilted like a mouth too late to close. That night, the foreman gathers a few of you, stone haulers, wheel runners, even the blacksmith's apprentice, and gives a quiet order. We're going to test the weak points. You don't ask what he means, you follow. First stop, the Sally Port. A narrow hidden door set low into the outer curtain wall, meant for sneak attacks or sudden escapes. You'd heard of it but never seen it. The stone around it is thick, the door itself solid oak, iron-banded and reinforced. But the hinges, they squeal when opened. Just a little, just enough. The blacksmith grunts and scratches his beard. Need more pitch, he mutters, already taking measurements. Next stop, the spiral stair in the south tower. You've climbed it dozens of times, never thinking much of its direction. But now the steward explains. It rises clockwise, forces right-handed attackers to expose more of their bodies, while defenders strike from above. You pause. You're right-handed. You test the theory. Sword arm cramped by the inner wall, shield on the outside, exposed. It's brilliant, brutal, and deliberate. Then the foreman points to a slot cut low in the outer tower stair. What do you think that is? You shrug. Drain? No, he says. An ankle breaker. If someone runs too fast up the stair, they catch their foot and fall forward, right into a spear. You stare at the slot again. It looked harmless, invisible. The castle has teeth. By moonrise, you've learned to look at the fortress differently. The slits in the wall aren't just for light. They channel archers' sights. The slope beneath the windows isn't just decorative. It deflects siege ladders, even the uneven paving stones in the gate tunnel, designed to trip running men. You help check the arrow loop cover plates, swinging them open and closed, testing their locks. They were built last month, but already one has warped slightly, rain swelling the frame. A carpenter is called before morning, and then there's the oil chute. You always assumed it was a myth, boiling pitch poured on invaders, but sure enough, just above the inner gate arch is a narrow shaft that leads straight down into the throat of the tunnel. It's fitted with a shutter now, but one twist of the latch and you could drop anything. Gravel, fire, oil, even hot sand. You shiver, just imagining it. Before sleep you climb the wall one last time and look out across the fields beyond the moat. Peaceful, quiet, mist rolling in silver folds. But you no longer see it as just scenery. You see approach vectors, blind spots, fields of fire, and for the first time you understand. This castle isn't simply meant to stand, it's meant to fight, and in every stone you've lifted, every mortar mix, every gate hinge you hammered into place, you were not just building shelter, you were building strategy. By now the castle is nearly done. The towers rise like ancient trees, proud and immovable. The walls stretch around you like an embrace, or a fortress, depending on who's knocking. But even with the stones in place, the parapets finished, and the gates swinging true, something strange lingers in the air. It's the sound, or rather, the sudden lack of it. The clanging, soaring, shouting and grunting that defined your days for years has begun to fade. The blacksmith now only fires the forge twice a week. The carpenter's crew is down to finishing touches. Doors, shutters, pegs. The treadwheel creaks less and less. And you, well, today you've been assigned to install iron bars across the pantry windows. Not glamorous, not heroic, but necessary. You're not alone. A few others work in silence beside you, brushing lime wash on interior walls, testing door latches and sweeping debris that once blanketed the floor. Everything feels quieter, softer, as if the castle is holding its breath. And that's when the guests arrive. It starts with a single rider on a sleek palfrey, draped in blue, crest on the saddle, boots too clean to have touched the road. A messenger. Then comes the entourage, a noble procession, bright with silks and gold thread, banners unfurled, servants rushing ahead to announce their presence, horses with braided manes, wheels greased with beeswax, and boots that cost more than most men's wages in a year. They sweep into the yard like they've owned it all along. You and your fellow builders pull back instinctively, dust on your hands, sweat on your brows. There's no announcement for you, no trumpet, no mention. But you built this, and now the Lord comes to claim it. The workers are told to line up beside the gatehouse, everyone from the stonemason to the stable boy. You stand shoulder to shoulder, tools in hand, backs aching, clothes sun-bleached and mortar-stained. The nobleman walks past, inspecting, flanked by his steward and 2 knights. He nods politely, says something about fine workmanship, then keeps walking. You're not angry, not really. It's always been this way. But you do feel something tighten in your chest, a strange mix of pride and distance, as if the place you've sweat into has already begun to forget you. Still, the castle isn't done until it's dressed. So begins the final task, furnishing. You're sent to help carry carved chests into the Lord's Hall, oak and walnut, inlaid with copper and lined with linen. You lift one end of a trunk heavier than sin, groaning under its weight, while a valet scolds you to avoid scuffing the floor you laid. Then it's tapestries, brought in from Flanders, heavy with crimson and gold, embroidered with hunting scenes and mythic beasts. You hammer the hooks into the plaster and realise with a quiet scoff that they cover the most finely cut stonework in the castle. But that's not the point. The point is warmth, wealth, power, and, above all, forgetting that this place was once bare earth and quarried stone. The castle breathes a new kind of life now, one of silks and spices, of hushed voices behind carved doors and boots that never touch mud. A week after the Lord's arrival, you're still on site, but not as a builder anymore. You're just leftover. Some are let go. The heaviest haulers, the lime mixers, the quarry runners. There's no need for brute force anymore. Only those with nimble hands or sharp eyes remain. Craftsmen, cleaners, grooms. You're among the lucky for now. You're asked to help hang a massive painted shield in the great hall, an escutcheon bearing the family's arms, gold lion, red field, a spray of stars above. It's not just decoration, it's a statement. This is who owns all this now, not the masons, not the carpenters, not the ragged crew that clawed it into being. No, now it belongs to legacy. But one afternoon, while checking a drain along the inner ward, you catch sight of the Lord himself, cloaked in velvet, surrounded by scribes and soldiers. He pauses beside the curtain wall, fingers trailing the mortar between stones. "That curve there," he says. "That was deliberate, yes?" The steward nods, leafing through a scroll. "Built to deflect catapult fire, my lord." "And that stair, clockwise?" "Yes, more defensible." He's nodding, eyes scanning the place like a chessboard. You expect him to move on. Instead, he says, almost to himself, "Strange. I never imagined it like this when I first gave the order. It looks so different, on paper." You stay quiet. You're not meant to speak. But part of you aches to say, "It didn't come from paper, my lord. It came from hands." Instead, you return to your task. That evening you help lay rushes in the great hall. Not hay, rushes, fresh cut from the river bank, strewn to cover the flagstones you once polished by hand. They carry herbs this time, lavender, sweet flag, a bit of mint, intended to mask the scent of people, animals, fires, and age. The castle smells different now. It feels different too. No more shouted orders, no more wheel creaks or stone grinds. Now there are whispered gossip trails, the clink of wine cups, the soft pluck of a lute somewhere near the solar. And yet, when the fires burn down and the torches flicker low, the castle remembers. You walk the wall at dusk as you always have, and catch sight of the oldest stone, set deep into the west tower, marked with the faintest red scratch from your own blade, years ago, when you cut yourself lifting it into place. It's still there, and so are you. Others pass through, lords, ladies, poets, knights. Some will feast, some will war, some will live here, some will die here, but the mortar still holds. The parapets still watch, because of you. You run your fingers along the wall one last time, cool and steady beneath your hand. You didn't just build a castle, you became part of it. The seasons turn. What was once scaffolding and shouting is now ivy and silence. The castle settles into itself, like an old man easing into a heavy cloak. You're no longer on the payroll, but that doesn't stop your boots from finding the road back. This time, you come not as a builder, but as a visitor, a nobody. You carry a sack of tools, not because you're here to work, but because you don't quite know how to walk without them. The gatehouse looks different now, polished and proud. A guard, fresh-faced and bored, barely glances at you. You mutter something about checking the drainage culverts. He waves you through without a word. Inside, it's another world. Children chase each other across the yard where once oxen strained against timber. A young woman in a green kirtle tends to the herb garden that now sits where the lime pits once stank. And near the well, a young man sits with a lute, plucking a clumsy tune. His voice is cracked but sweet. You drift unnoticed along the edge of it all, hands behind your back, watching. And then you hear it. The creak. It comes from the wheel tower. Faint, rhythmic, unmistakable. You follow the sound. Inside the tower, the great treadwheel crane still stands, weathered now, but not dead. A boy is walking its inner ring, smaller than you were when you first stepped inside, but the rhythm is the same. Step, clunk, squeak. A man nearby, maybe the carpenter's son, greets you with a nod. Still works, he says, patting the rope. They use it now and then, mostly for lifting supplies. You don't answer, you're too busy watching. The boy walks that wheel like it's a game. He doesn't know the pain it used to mean, the pressure, the heat, the way your thighs burned after 10 minutes, or how your knees quivered as the platform groaned beneath you. He'll never know the way your heart thundered when a load slipped, or the terror of feeling the axle seize. But he doesn't have to, because you carried all that weight so he wouldn't have to. That's the strange thing about building something meant to last. You leave behind no monument to you, only the thing itself. You step out into the sun again, blinking at how tall the place has become, taller than you remember. The stones you lifted now wear moss. The joints you smoothed are cracked with frost lines. But it holds. And then someone calls your name. You turn. It's the steward. Older now, with white in his beard and a limp in his gait. But his eyes are sharp. He squints for a moment before smiling. "I thought that was you." You nod. "I was just—" "I know," he says, checking the corners. "Couldn't help yourself." You share a small laugh, the kind built on years and dust and quiet pride. "I've kept the books," he says, "the full list, every name, every shift, every injury, even yours." You blink. No one's ever said that before. He claps your shoulder. "Come in, there's stew." The stew is simple. Onions, barley, the barest hint of salt pork, but it tastes like memory. You sit at the long table in what used to be the mason's lodge, though it's been cleaned up now, with benches replaced and a hearth where the old tool racks used to hang. Someone's even painted the ceiling beams with vines and leaves. Aesthetic touches. Civilized, the steward calls it, though with a grin that suggests he misses the rawness too. As you eat, others wander in. A few older faces. One of the sawyers who used to split timber near the moat, now with a twisted spine and hands too gnarled for axes. One of the lime mixers, who still smells faintly of chalk no matter how many years have passed. You nod to each other like veterans. Words aren't needed. There's a quiet reverence now that wasn't there in the building days. Back then it was dust and jokes and swearing and calluses. Now it's memory, solid, weighted, and a bit too heavy to carry alone. After the meal, the steward leads you to the tower library. It didn't exist when you left. A later addition, built atop the old north turret. You climb the narrow stair behind him, past shelves lined with scrolls and ledgers and little sacks of pressed herbs. At the top, a room of quiet light and parchment. He shows you the ledger. Its leather cover is worn, the pages thick with age and oil from 100 hands. He opens it to a bookmarked page, and there, in neat inked lines, is your name. Not just once, dozens of times. Day 119, Hall Team, Inner Bailey Trench. Day 234, lime burn, minor injury, return next day. Day 5 or 11, Wheel Runner, Tower Pulley Test. Your handwriting appears once. Faint, clumsy, just an initial where someone asked for it. You don't even remember it, but there it is, pressed between the facts. "Did you keep all of these?" you ask. He nods. "Not just yours, everyone's, even the lad who carried nails." You leaf through a few more pages and find them. All the names, all the sweat. And suddenly you feel something you hadn't expected. Permanence. You built stone, yes, but someone remembered your hands. Before leaving, you ask to see one last thing, the quarry logbook. You want to know where it all came from, really came from. The first stone, the start. The steward hesitates, then brings it from a shelf. Together, you trace the entry. Initial block, South Cliff, hauled via ox team March 2nd. That was before your time, but just below it. First cut stone delivered on foot, carried by hand, April 6th. You run your finger over the line, carried by hand. You remember that day. You remember the sweat soaking your back, the sloshing of the muddy road, the way the stone slipped in your grip, cutting your knuckles as the others laughed and helped steady it. That was you, that first real block, that was you. You don't say goodbye when you leave the castle. You don't need to. You step out under the same gate you helped raise with, ropes and curses and splinters, boots echoing on stone you helped tamp into place. And the wind sliding over the parapets almost feels like it says your name. Time keeps going, whether stone remembers or not. You're older now, stiffer in the knees, slower to wake, quicker to sigh when you rise too fast. Your hands, once calloused and blackened with pitch and lime, now bear the fine veins of age and the softness of disuse. But the castle, your castle, still stands. On a rare summer morning you return once more, not to work, not even to reminisce, but simply to see. You've heard the rumours from travellers and tinkers in the towns. There's a festival today. Something about St. Michael, or the local harvest, or maybe just an excuse to hang garlands and dance. The fields leading to the walls are golden with wheat now. Once, those same slopes were pitted with carts and trenches, men shouting over the din of their own labour. Now they're dotted with tents and cook fires, the sound of flutes and children laughing. The castle greets you differently this time, not with silence nor with commands, but with music. A soft drum beat, some crude fiddling, the scent of roasting meat wafting over the battlements. Bright ribbons hang from the gatehouse, tied around stone teeth you once carved with aching hands. Inside, the courtyard is unrecognisable. The dusty yard has become a dance floor. Jugglers toss apples. A boy spins in circles, giggling until he collapses. Someone's trained a bear to stand upright, chained at the neck but strangely gentle. The kitchens have spilled outward into the yard, offering broth and cider and sweet tarts thick with honey. You sit on a low stone ledge, one you once helped set in place, and watch. A child offers you a baked turnip wrapped in cloth. Her face is smudged, her smile radiant. You take it with a nod, and she scurries off without asking who you are. And that's when it hits you. Nobody knows. Not the cook, not the guards, not the merry dancer stomping beside the well. No one remembers who carved the grooves in the tower stairs, who laid the drainage stone beneath the garden beds, who mixed the lime that still clings to the undersides of the vaults. They don't need to. 'Cause you remember, and the stones remember. Even if no one calls your name anymore, they walk where you once walked. Sleep in beds beneath beams you once lifted. Pray in chapels you saw built from bare earth. Laugh in halls that once echoed only with hammer blows. Somewhere a pair of boys chase each other along the wall walk. One nearly slips, catches the crenellation, and keeps running. You wince, but you also smile. The stones held. They're still holding. And so are you. Later in the day, as the sun dips low and the sky bleeds soft orange, you find yourself back at the base of the old tower. The first one finished. The one you helped raise from foundation to finial, stone by agonizing stone. Its surface is weathered now, pitted by rain and wind and 100 winters. But it still stands, every inch the same height it was when you first stepped back to admire it, with sore legs and a raw-throated cheer. A boy nearby is carving something into the ground with a stick. You glance over. He's drawing the castle, his version. It's lopsided and oddly scaled, but unmistakable. The gatehouse, the towers, even the outer curtain wall with its little guard nooks, all drawn from memory from living here. "You like this place?" you ask him. He nods without looking up. "It's strong. Mama says no storm can knock it down." You nod. He squints at the walls. "Did knights build it?" You pause for a beat. "No," you say softly. "People did." He tilts his head, unsure of your meaning. But before he can ask more, his mother calls him away, and he runs off, leaving his crooked little castle in the dust behind him. You walk the outer wall one final time, fingers brushing the lichened soft stone. No fanfare, no name chiselled into the entryway, no statue in the courtyard. But in the mortar, layered deep, you left something more permanent. Sweat, patience, years, resolve. And now, as the music fades and torches begin to flicker in the halls you once lit with raw flame, you let yourself rest against the tower base. Cool stone at your back, a breeze off the hills brushing your cheek. The castle has a heartbeat still, not of builders, but of life. You close your eyes, you built this, and for a moment, even if no one else ever knows, that's enough. So now, as your own walls quiet and the noise of the day slips softly into memory, let yourself drift like those old ropes swinging gently from the crane beams. You've walked the quarry paths, the scaffold boards, the mossy courtyard stones. You've felt the weight of rock and time, and still you stand. Not every hand that builds is remembered, but every stone remembers the hand that set it. Every groove, every grain of mortar carries the shape of a life lived with purpose. Even the smallest tap of the hammer once echoed across centuries. Tonight, as you close your eyes, imagine that quiet hum still humming in the walls, the memory of effort, of sweat, of quiet triumph, the kind that doesn't need to shout to be heard. You're safe now. The storm is long past. The scaffolds have fallen away, the towers are lit, the flags fly gentle in the breeze, and the walls, your walls, hold strong against the dark. Let your breath slow like the turning of the great tread wheel. Let your thoughts settle stone by stone, and sleep, knowing that even if no one speaks your name aloud, some part of the world stands taller, because you were here,